But we've also got a challenge today in that it's very overcast and there's not much light, so it's very difficult to isolate anything. You know what? I don't think this location's working, and I think sometimes you just have to accept that and move on. I know I'm going to regret doing this when I get back home. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. So I've come out again in search of autumn colours. About a week, just over a week ago, I went to Font Rocha, and there was just the first hints of autumn colours appearing in a few isolated places. I'm going to go back there again in maybe a couple of weeks' time, but in the meantime I thought I'd come to Zoret Ducati, which I first came to about three and a half months ago, middle of summer. And I thought at the time there was just a possibility it might work for autumn colours, but I'm not seeing a lot. There's a few that have turned, a few isolated leaves, little bits here and there, but we've also got a challenge today in that it's very overcast and there's not much light, so it's very difficult to isolate anything. So I'm not sure if we're going to get anything particularly spectacular here today. But as always, I am going to try my best to get at least one image, if not two. They might not be, you know, my best, but I'll try and get something while I'm here. I hope you'll enjoy this video. If you do, and you're not already a subscriber, please consider hitting subscribe. And if you are a subscriber, thank you very much, I appreciate that. Anyway, let's go and see what I can find. Okay, so I've found this tree down here in this sort of area. I did actually try going right down close to it, but if I go down close to it, I can't find any way to actually isolate the tree. It's just too much. So what I've decided to do is shoot it from up here with a long lens. I've got my tripod as high as I dare get it to try and clear this grass in the foreground. I've got the tree below the line of the trees beyond it, so hopefully that's keeping that back part quite dark. Shooting at about 84mm, and I've put a circular polarizer on to just try and add a little bit more contrast and saturation into those leaves on there. Okay, so I decided not to hang around for the light down there. I hung around for about 5 or 10 minutes, but I'm just not convinced that the composition was working. What I decided to do was come up this little kind of hill thing on the side of the track and shoot right out at 200mm, filling the frame with the tree, cutting out the sky, and hopefully that will let me boost the contrast and darken the background a bit. So 200mm, still with a circular polarizer on, which does seem to be doing a little bit to add contrast. F11, 2.5 of a second, ISO 64. You know what? I don't think this location's working, and I think sometimes you just have to accept that and move on. There is some breaks appearing in the clouds, so I'm going to go somewhere where if we do get a decent sunset, hopefully I can make use of it. So, time to do a bit of driving. So, having given up on the last location, Zoret Ducati, I've driven about 30 minutes away to get to Tibby Reservoir, and it looks like the clouds are breaking up a bit, but whether that means we're going to get an interesting sunset or not, I don't know. They might break up too much and disappear, but I thought I'd come here because, to be honest, there was nothing at Zoret Ducati that was really speaking to me as a potential sunset shoot. It's about an hour and a quarter before sunset, and I'm on my way down to the lake now. I have heard a helicopter around, and I think they may be doing firefighting drills because they use Tibby Reservoir as a source of water for the firefighting helicopter. So that might be interesting to see, but also might interfere with the photography. We'll have to see. Okay, so we've got beautiful, tranquil, still water. Some nice cloud patterns, but they are disappearing fast. We're still an hour before sunset, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that by the time we get to sunset, those clouds are going to be gone. So I'm going to take a couple of shots now. The first one I'm taking is using a bush down in the water down here, in the bottom left-hand corner of the scene. Then we've got the lake going out with all the reflections in, the reflections of the surrounding hills and mountains, then the hills and mountains, and then the sky. And because I like the symmetry of having the center line, so the hills are immediately above the center of the frame and the reflections are immediately below the center of the frame. I've got a two-stop hard-edged ND grad on because the sky is quite bright compared to the rest of the scene. Focusing right out on infinity, right out at the end there. F11 1/15 of a second. Sometimes when I'm struggling to find a composition, I like to get the long lens out. And what I'm doing at the minute, I've got the 70mm, 70 to 200 on, 70mm, and I'm just focusing in on the first bit of hill that kind of juts out, and then there's more hills behind. Of course, they're all reflected in that still water. No filters on, because I don't want to lose any reflections, so no polarizer. And I don't need to darken the sky or anything, because I can balance the exposure without. F11 1/15 of a second, really simple, and hopefully it'll work. I know I'm going to regret doing this when I get back home, but I'm going to shoot a pano of this scene. About 105mm on the 70-200, vertical orientation, leveled the tripod, leveled the camera, checked the histogram all the way through and set the exposure for the brightest part, which gives me 1/25 of a second. Let's see what it works out like. The sun has disappeared completely off of the scene. There's still a little tiny bit of light. Yeah, I've got to hang over on the hill over there, but there's no composition that way. I'm shooting, spin you around, that way. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make use of the way the clouds look in this to maximise the effectiveness of the image. So there's not a lot of cloud left. I don't know how well it's showing up on here, probably not very well at all, but basically there's just a few horizontal streaks of cloud running across, and those horizontal streaks are also reflected in the water down here. So I'm shooting with a horizontal format. No, I'm not. I'm shooting with a vertical format, portrait orientation, about 104, 105mm. Still no filters, don't need them. I can balance the exposure perfectly now because there's no significant light on the scene at all. What I've got basically is the horizontal clouds reflected in the water in the bottom of the frame, kind of leading up in a couple of little stripes up towards the centre of the frame, which is sort of right at the end of the visible part of the reservoir where there's a little building. And then above that, I've got the actual horizontal clouds running across, sort of leading down. I quite like it. I think it's an interesting dynamic with the clouds. I'm just tweaking the composition every so often just to try and keep the clouds in the right place and the centre point in the right place. That might mean adjusting the focal length a bit. But I think that's probably going to be the best. I don't think we're going to get much in the way of colour and colours in the sky as the sun actually sets. There's just not enough cloud there. So I'm just waiting. We are pretty much at official sunset time now. Of course, the sun's been gone behind the mountains for ages. So the clouds are still there, still as horizontal patterns, but the patterns have moved further up the sky, so the reflections have moved further down the frame. So I've actually opened my focal length up to 70mm now, because I think the clouds are really what makes this image interesting. Those horizontal patterns just adds, I don't know, adds something to it, and I can't really explain what. I'm just hanging on to see if we get, you know, a little bit of more colour in there as the sun drops further below the horizon. Getting some colour in the sky up there, which is kind of just off of sunset. I'm just hoping that's going to spread across into that horizontal cloud. If that lights up nice and pink, that could look really, really nice. colour is now fading out of the sky. It's going to be getting properly dark soon. It may not be all that apparent on the video because it compensates quite well, but it is getting pretty gloomy now. So I think I'm going to pack up and head for home and see what I've got. I guess this video is about not being afraid to give up on one location if it's not working for you and come to another one, and hopefully that's worked out for me. I took one shot at the other location. I don't know if it worked or not. I guess you'll already seen by now, but I think I've got at least a couple of shots from this location which makes the trip worthwhile. It was worthwhile anyway. I always enjoy getting out. Anyway, I am going to pack up and head for home before it gets completely dark here. I think I've got my head torch with me. I've got a torch anyway. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button, that's the thumbs up, or giving it a share on social media. And if you're not a subscriber, well, now would be a good time to hit subscribe as well. Let me know what you think, comments down below. And as always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. So thank you very much. And until the next video, bye.